I first thank my mother. She definitely informed my travel experience. She taught us about Africa from young, and that was necessary for us to have a knowledge of self. My experience has been very fulfilling, and I owe it all to the people that I have met. My favorite thing to do while I'm here is meeting small groups of people who I naturally and genuinely grow a relationship with enough to move around. Yeah, so I'm currently volunteer teaching at the Spellmore Institute, and it is a international inspired school. The teaching experience has been very eye-opening because I was surprised at how fulfilling it has been for me. My name is Kalea. I'm a recent computer science graduate from the US, traveling abroad before moving on with the next phase of my life. I felt like this was a necessary experience, traveling around some African countries before I move on. Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., in the United States, that's on the East Coast. And my background pretty much surrounded by nothing but Black people. I feel like I'm a product of the community. And throughout my experience growing up, I was able to move around so much within the city that I felt like it gave me a unique perspective when I would talk to a lot of my friends. And that perspective really trained me to value travel because it helped me contextualize cultural differences and societal differences. I first thank my mother. She definitely informed my travel experience. She taught us about Africa from young, and that was necessary for us to have a knowledge of self. So having a knowledge of self as a value growing up inspired my want to go see Africa. So this is my first time in Africa, and I wanted to start in West Africa. Ghana I saw as my best option. People talk so much about how it's really like your passport into the continent. So I wanted to come explore. This is my first time in Ghana and first time in Africa. I say my first fear was definitely just imagining how I may or may not adjust to the culture. I did intentionally come in with less preconceptions about how I may imagine it to be so that I could take it all in genuinely. But trying to figure out how I may adjust, the simplest things like the food, right? You hear so much about, oh, you might get sick when you go to Ghana or, many different foreign countries. You may not be used to the food. And knowing that I wanted to stay for a longer period of time, I wondered just what it would be like to start to build simple interpersonal relationships. The experience has been nothing but great. I find that it's actually easy to build interpersonal relationships because so many people do want to talk to you. And culturally, even aside from a foreigner in my country, I think Ghanaians are very welcoming, hospitable. My experience has been very fulfilling, and I owe it all to the people that I have met. My favorite thing to do while I'm here is meeting small groups of people who I naturally and genuinely grow a relationship with enough to move around for a certain period of time to give me a lot of perspective about the country and really help to have me feel that experience of being in Ghana, or what some people may say, returning home. I think that's most valuable. Developing that feeling that can't be articulated, I feel like it's somewhat of a consciousness, and that's that spirituality aspect of it. I say this has definitely been a very holistic experience. And before coming, I did have particular goals that I had in mind. I did have particular expectations. However, once I got here, I realized that my experience without trying so much would be so much more than my particular goals, that I needed to be more relaxed, that I needed to really just embrace the experience and not try to dictate so much about what I thought it should be or could be. I still have my goals in mind, but part of the Ghanaian culture, I feel like it forces you to just relax a little bit, take a step back. And I would be crazy if I did try to force myself to be so particular when I'm in a place that doesn't necessarily require you to be that. Yeah, so I'm currently volunteer teaching at the Spellmore Institute, and it is a international inspired school. I connected with the owners of this school simply by booking my Airbnb. My first month in Ghana, I spent in the Accra area in Pokwasi, staying at an Airbnb. I then moved on to do 2 months in Kumasi, came back for my 4th month in Pokwasi, and the same people who I stayed with my first month in Ghana, stayed with them again. They also happen to own the school, and they really encouraged me to volunteer. The teaching experience has been very eye-opening, not because I learned anything particular that I didn't expect or know, but eye-opening because I was surprised at how fulfilling it has been for me. I think we talked a tiny bit pre-interview about my small background with education. So I'm used to being around students. I do value like the youth and I value their education. But being here in Ghana and interacting with the kids on a day-to-day basis, having them teach me about their culture indirectly, just seeing how they joke with each other, seeing how they laugh with each other, and how they articulate themselves, how they challenge themselves, how they respond to things that they may not know. All of those things just continue to expand my vision of, what Africa is or what, I can be. So particularly having this experience after graduating university in the US, I think it's something that more people should look into if you are genuinely interested in cross-cultural education or travel in general. The one thing I always want to teach my kids throughout our experiences is self-confidence, being able to articulate themselves and having them understand exactly why those things are important. As you move along throughout life, the best thing you can do for yourself is advocate. And you can't advocate without your education. You can't advocate without knowing how to articulate yourself. So I want them to build a stronger understanding of their own values. I'm taking away a new baby. I feel like because this has been so valuable for me, and because I really have friends who have seen a little bit of my experience and they've expressed to me how much they appreciate this, that I'm doing it, and some how much they would be interested in doing it themselves. In partnership with the owners of this school, we are setting up a summer teaching internship program to connect university students from the US to teach, starting off first in Ghana at the Spellmore Institute. Outside of Accra, so I definitely visited the Elmina slave castles, right? That was one of the first places I went to. I visited Cocoon National Park. I've been to Cape Coast University. That was a nice experience, seeing what the universities look like. While in Kumasi, I went to Kwame Nkrumah Science and Tech University. Visited many different small towns. Again, I've been for 4 months, many different smaller areas. Most recently, I've been to a village town in Somania, Ghana. I think that's on the border of the Volta region, the eastern region. And I had someone just walk me around and literally taking me to talk to people, taking me to meet people. And that was the whole experience within itself. I was here during the holidays. Holidays is a whole different experience than just being on every day. Both are beautiful, but the holidays is an independent experience that can be packaged and talked about in its own. My first dish, I'd say my first couple. I don't know if I remember the very first. My first couple of dishes were banku, and ground nut or peanut butter soup prepared with chicken. That's definitely my top 3 dishes. I've had fufu and palm nut soup. That's in my top 3. And another dish I had very early on was, it's probably just something like a katumari stew. Mm-hmm.
How has it been like just experimenting with food, because the flavors and the pepper is so different from what you guys eat in America?
Yeah. It's very different. It was very different. But me personally, my background, we ate a lot of raw food growing up, and we looked towards a healthier style of living that kept us away from that typical like American diet. I didn't eat too much fast food growing up, so it wasn't as much of an adjustment for me, but still different. And the experience itself stands out the most because you eat a lot of, what do you call it, swallow food. So just eating all different swallow foods, the kankies, that even makes you think about eating differently, right? And the pepper itself, the peppers probably is the biggest difference actually, because I'm not a spicy food eater. If you come to Ghana, you have to get used to eating spicy. One last thing I'll say about the food. The food is good, right? And I feel like my body is operating differently in Ghana, particularly because of the food, all of the peppers. I feel like I have a heightened metabolism. All of the sun you get, maybe walking around a tiny bit more than usual. I don't know. I think my metabolism just kicking, so it's a little more difficult to not necessarily hold weight, but gaining weight. I just got my mind off of it. I don't think it's gonna happen. But I don't think I told people about my travel. So I'm traveling for a little over a year to mainly African countries. And I would encourage people to do this form of travel, journeying along the different countries. First, to take a block of time for yourself. We grow up, you go to school from 3 years old, 4 years old, all the way up until you graduate university, 22, 21, probably like 20, 21. And you're constantly in a process, right? You're constantly in school, you're constantly working, right? You're constantly playing sports. And all of these different things have extreme value, but you never have time to establish your own process for yourself. Traveling in the way that I'm doing is giving me the opportunity to establish a structure and a process for myself, keeping in mind what I want my outcome to be. So I would encourage everyone to journey, because not only do you explore and get to know yourself in new ways, get to know other people, other cultures, but you have an opportunity to design who you want to be, to design your life. Give inputs that are conducive to what you want your output to be. Usually they're given to us.